Welcome back, Richard. It's good to see you this morning.
Happy June.
It
Um,
is it is June, it is summer, and it is hot.
yeah, we always forget. We
Yeah.
get lulled in the winter. Our winters are horrible. It's in the 70s and 80s. Then all of a sudden summer comes and wow, oh, I forgot about summer.
Yeah. Yeah,
But
there's a
summer has two meanings. One is the weather and the time of year, but the other is summer vacation.
That's right.
It's at that time of year again. The school year is winding down. It's over in some states and winding down in others. We live
Yeah.
in Florida,
Well,
and
this past week was the last week for public schools
last week
in
of
our district.
school, and the kids are coming in with a new sense of lightness and silliness because they're done for the year. And at long last, it's here. And we get these sighs of relief from
Yeah.
both parents and children, kids. They're just, ooh, it's like this.
Yeah.
Okay, it's finally over. Okay. No more deadlines, no more morning struggles to get them up and out, and no more, chasing everybody to bed so they get a good night's sleep and
Yeah, well,
all that.
what I was thinking that, the other week we talked about the summer a little bit. We talked about the summer slide and we talked about, how to avoid some of that. We're going to talk a little bit more about some of that today. But you know, after we recorded those podcasts, you and I were kind of sitting around and I just thought I would throw this out there because you know, we talked about how different summer is now than it was when, years ago, when we experienced summer because, the last day of school was a huge thing.
Right.
And
Yeah.
man, I'm telling you, over the past week, it was surprising how the last 3 days, 3 or 4 days of school, how few students went to school. And, and
Um,
and it's so different than it was back when we were in school because the last week of school was finals.
yeah.
And the last day of school, sometimes a lot of times you had a test on the last day of school
Mhm.
because that was the last day, that was your final exam. And so
Right.
when 3 o'clock or whatever time it was when I arrived, you were ready to go because it truly was now you're done because you're really done.
Right.
And man, now with the all the high stakes testing and the end of course exams, school's been over for most of these students for weeks now because
Right.
once those tests happen, then things are done.
Right. Yeah, I've been talking to teachers and parents. Parents were expressing their concern early on in May because they realized that, I mean, the kids don't want to go to school anymore
Right.
in the last 2 weeks of May. And parents are saying, wait a minute, you have to go to school. And they said, but mom, there's nothing happening in school. We're finished.
Well, and Richard, for goodness sakes, there's a lot of times where teachers will say, "There's really not a reason for you to come to school tomorrow."
That's right.
It's like,
And it's not the teacher's fault. It's not the school
no,
district's fault. Um, and I've talked to some teachers, and we are, you and I are talking about putting together a couple of podcasts about many of the unintended consequences of high stakes testing. And
yeah,
one of them is that it forces everybody to end the school year earlier, because if the most important thing is your end of course exam and all of your final exams, if they're done early, there's no reason to come back to school for those last week or two for
right,
many students. It's not the teachers, it's not the kids, these are state laws that passed by legislators who say, we have to have these, we have to have this, this, and this. Well, in order to accommodate everything, the last 2 weeks of school. So this is a casualty. This is an unintended consequence of this whole world of let's test kids to make sure they're making progress. And there are some unintended consequences, and one of them is a shortening of the school year.
absolutely.
Okay.
But again, that's not necessarily the topic for today because that's just something a little bit of an update on from a couple of weeks ago when we were talking about that. And we'll talk more about some of those
Right.
issues in the coming weeks. But today we're going to talk about preparing for the summer a little bit more because man, summer can be chaotic for parents, especially if parents have more than one kid. and you have you're juggling schedules and juggling routines, and it can be a big hectic.
Right. And the other thing that happens is we talk about this big sigh of relief at the end of the school year, and I think children and many parents say, okay, I'm done now. I have the entire summer to
Hmm.
relax.
Right.
I don't have to get up early. I can stay up late. I can eat what I want. I can do what I want. I don't have to be on a schedule. And there's this temptation just to open up the schedule and
Yeah.
allow everybody to just function. That's probably not a good idea.
Right.
And we have four reasons why it's not a good idea just to let your kids have develop the impression that there's nothing to do. Okay. One of them is we talked about summer slide.
Hmm.
Kids who don't do any schoolwork over the summer actually lose skills in those 10 to 12 weeks. So, and we talked about that in a previous podcast.
Yeah.
Another issue is, do you really want your kids to think it's normal to take 10 weeks off? Okay.
Right.
When in their life, in their lifetime, when will they ever get 10 weeks off? Never.
Right.
Okay. And we're teaching them that, oh, okay, honey, for the next 12 years, you can have 10 weeks off. That's the only time
Right.
that that's even possible. And do we really want to train our kids that that's okay?
Right.
The other thing is, it's not like they were worn out. Kids are saying, oh, I've worked so hard this year and I'm just exhausted and I need a 12-week vacation. No, you didn't work that hard and you don't need a 12, maybe 2 weeks. Okay. No one else in the world gets 10 or 12 weeks off. I mean,
Right.
Bernie, when was the last time you had 10 weeks off? When you were in high school,
Yeah. Yeah, that's
early high school, because eventually you get a job in
right.
sports and all that. So 2 or 3 weeks of relaxation should do it, but you don't need 10 or 12. Also, so one reason is summer slide. Second reason is it's a false promise. Third, human bodies are rhythm machines. We like rhythm. We like predictability. We like sameness. Our bodies like that. We may want to do other things, but our bodies want rhythm. So it's up to us to impose that rhythm on ourselves. And finally, if you let your kids run wild all summer, play 12 or 15 hours of video games every day, 7 days a week, and man, it's really difficult to get them back into harness in August.
Right.
Okay. There's this huge transition where, okay, now put all the games away, let's get to bed. And most of us don't do that. And all of a sudden, school starts again, and our kids are on summer mode, and school has already started. Okay.
Yeah, and now and we
Understand.
can hear the parents moaning and groaning about, yeah, sure. All that's well and good,
You,
but
you come to my house and impose this,
right, right.
right?
And we can completely appreciate that.
I understand. Right.
My stepdaughters, we're dealing with some of these things. We will be dealing with some of these things with
Yeah.
them.
Right.
Their summer just started today, so so there's that. But much of this is easy to talk about, but we do recognize that, my goodness, it is a task to
Right. Yeah,
overcome.
I always want to apologize. I find myself apologizing to people because I forgot how hectic you're getting a reminder again, aren't you?
Right.
Second reminder. How hectic life is, how hectic life can be with children. I'm a grandfather now, okay? And I'm watching my children raise their children. And now I'm beginning to, and sometimes I help them out. I help take care of the kids. And as I watch my kids as parents, how incredibly demanding this is. They all work full time.
Hmm.
They take care of houses. They're working full time. They're taking care of houses. How demanding it is to take care of a newborn, and young children, and then teenagers. And many families have young children, tweeners, and teenagers. So each age group needs something else. So this is like juggling beach balls in a wind. I mean, I recognize how hard it is. And there's this deadly mix of chaos and fatigue. So
Right.
houses are when we sit in our offices, I was looking at another practice the other day, and they had pictures of their offices. And these offices are so clean and they're organized and they have these beige carpets. And it really is like this soothing place to be. Well, when we sit in those offices with just the right lighting and just the right temperature, we forget, and we're dispensing advice, but we forget how chaotic it is when you're on the front lines. I
Yeah.
mean, we can talk, Bernie, you and I both taught. This is easy stuff to teach,
Oh
but
yeah.
it's very difficult to do. And it got me thinking, I'm going to talk about American football. You
Hmm.
know,
I got you.
football is different for you.
Yeah.
In American football, we have these what are called plays. And so you have a blackboard or a whiteboard, or now it's an iPad. And each player has an assignment. And if each player does his assignment, every play is designed to be a touchdown. Okay.
Yeah.
The problem is that there are 11 players on the other side whose job it is to make sure you don't do your job.
Right.
Okay. And it struck me that that's sort of the way raising a family
Right.
is that
Hmm.
you have this plan, or you should have a plan, but you have all these things working against you. There's all that stuff working against you. And all of these things can disrupt your plans. If just one of those 11 players succeeds, there's no touchdown. It interrupts the entire play. In fact, you might even lose ground.
Right.
Okay. And I thought that's the way it is with families. Okay.
Mhm.
My daughter has a rambunctious 1-year-old. She's actually 13 months old. And she's she's starting already to express her independence. I mean, even at 13, 14 months of age. She's also learning to run. She walked at 11 months, she's running at 13 months, and sometimes her grandmother can't keep up. She can't catch her because she runs faster than her grandmother. Okay.
Yeah.
So it's easy. We recognize that it's easy for us to tell you how things should be. Okay. But when I'm in the house watching this and watching the front lines, I remember how difficult, and we want to begin by saying we understand. We forgot, but now we understand how difficult this is.
Absolutely. You mentioned the combination of chaos and fatigue. Earlier, we mentioned that, okay, for the kids, by and large, they made it through the school year, but it's not like they maybe wore down from the school year, but it wasn't like it was 180 days of working in the mines,
Hard labor, right?
those kind of things. And again, the last couple of weeks of school, the way that it's structured now, there was a pretty steady decline in the amount of work and everything that they did over the past couple of weeks. And so it's not like they are being relieved from this pressure that, again, was intense up until the last moment. Parents, on the other hand, we recognize again that many homes have working parents. Even if there's two parents in the home, typically both parents are working. And
Mhm.
so that fatigue is true and is real for parents. And so while you're still juggling your work and those demands and expectations, now you have the kids that you're dealing with. And sure, if you have two parents and one kid, that's
Manageable.
easy to manage.
Mhm.
Two parents, two kids, okay. We still have, it's still fair sides. We're balanced on both sides.
Right,
But as soon as you get two parents with three kids, or you have a single parent, now all of a sudden it becomes much more challenging. And
right.
so, again, like you said, we recognize that this isn't easy. We recognize that this introduces a lot of challenges for parents because you have to do the job of multiple people. During the school year,
Right.
you did a job and the teacher did a job during the day. Now you're doing the whole job.
That's right. And I marvel. I mean, I forgot because I do have parents who come in and they are exhausted, but I forgot that when my daughter walks in the door, she's a teacher. When she walks in the door from a whole day of work, she's exhausted. Bernie, your wife is a teacher.
Hmm.
And at the end of the school day, she's tired,
Right?
right? I
Yeah.
mean, they've worked really, really hard. You talk to any teacher, they're exhausted at the end of the day. As soon as my daughter walks in the door, she's walking into her second job of the day,
Hmm.
okay? Because now it's dinner, homework, bath, teeth, bed, all that stuff. that can be that's another full-time job.
Yeah. Well, and
And you're
especially
exhausted when you start.
right, and especially when you're dealing with kids and they're, you know, my wife teaches middle school, and the kids are in middle school, and so
Mhm.
it's like, all right, so you're dealing with middle school and middle school drama all day long,
Right.
and then you come home and there's more middle school drama.
And there's more middle school drama waiting. But now you're stepping into your second job. So we talk about people working 12 or 15 hours a day. Most parents, and especially I think mothers, work and then come home and into the second job. And it's exhausting. You're exhausted from working all day, but your children are hungry and tired
Right.
at this time of the day. And they all have things to do. The little kids want to run and play and make messes and demand your attention. The older ones want to be left alone, which you have to attend to that. And then there's homework if you have to do homework. So we apologize because we talk as though this is very easy to do. We realize that it's not.
Right.
And it's the same with summer. Okay, so we know that the school year can be very difficult to manage, but it's the same with summer. But summer provides a great opportunity to sort of regain some order, to manage some of the chaos
Right.
that has insinuated itself into your home during the school year. Things tend to fall apart during the school year. Life becomes very chaotic. And if you talk to any parent, May is just filled with
Yeah.
performances and art shows and graduation ceremonies. And it's a very, very busy month of the school year. So chaos tends to percolate up. In summer, rather than just saying, okay, good, it's over and let everything happen, summer's a good time. It's a great opportunity to get some order back in your life so that your home works better. Okay.
Absolutely. And so, the crux of all of this is to say that, while we recognize how challenging so much of this is for parents, one of the ways that you can sort of manage it a little bit easier is to bring some order to it.
Right. Mhm.
Again, recognizing how difficult it is and recognizing that, um, we're talking about kids, but there's all these other things in life, your house that you're trying to, and home that you're trying to
Mhm.
deal with, and,
Yeah.
your own fatigue and your own mental wellness and physical wellness. But, you know, we have to find a way to bring some order to the chaos
Hmm.
so that things can be more predictable, things can be more manageable, and things can you know what to expect. As we kind of alluded at the beginning of this podcast, is a lot of times the summer becomes so free and loose when it comes to the schedule that we eat at different times every day, we do different things every day, and that's some of that stuff is okay, but when you can build some structure and some order to it, it
Hmm.
makes things so much easier for you and for your kids.
Right. And what better time than summer? I mean, now, so you don't have the imposition of school. The bad part is you don't have the imposition because you don't have a schedule. There's no schedule imposed. But you have the ability now to regain some control,
Right.
to flush out some of the chaos. And summertime actually provides a wonderful opportunity for you to do this, okay? We know the problem in trying to impose a schedule is that houses are always falling apart. I mean, if you live in a house, even if you're single, even if you're the only person in the house, you know how quickly things can fall apart. Mail stacks up on the table, dishes stack up in the sink. Yeah, everybody has good intention. It's very difficult to maintain that consistent theme because houses are always trying. We tell people when they buy houses, I don't know whether you and I were talking about this or not, but we were saying if you buy a house,
Yeah.
as soon as you buy it, you're going to start repairing it. Okay.
Well, yeah, it goes back to your analogy of the of football, where, for all good plans that you have, something, or someone
Or
is
someone
planning against you.
is
You
working
know?
again.
And so for all the good intentions and work that you do to maintain your physical environment,
Mhm.
your physical environment is also pushing against that
Right.
in some way. You know, you're here in the office. Um, Everybody will love that I'm mentioning this, but here in the office, we've had issues with our air conditioning. Now that may not be much of an issue for people in some areas, but here in Central Florida, if you don't have air conditioning during the day,
Mhm.
when it is reaching 93, 95 degrees
Right.
by like 10 o'clock in the morning, um, it is miserable.
And 90% humidity.
Right, exactly. I forgot about that part. And so we've had in the past 3 weeks, I think that we've had air conditioning folks come out 3 or 4 times
Right.
to deal
Mhm.
with. And so forget all the work that you have to do, forget all the other obligations that you have. Now you have the house, your physical environment working against you, and that
Mhm.
introduces more stress and more things. So yeah, there is there are other things that we have to deal with as well.
Right. It's almost it's almost like things conspire, like the dishes insist on accumulating in the sink. The
Right,
laundry insists on accumulating somewhere, okay? Whether it's clean or dirty laundry, it's just like it insists on piling up somewhere, okay?
right,
So houses are always working, they're always trying to fall apart. Also, our children
right,
are always trying to resist your well-designed plans. But it's normal. It's not like kids are bad or there's something wrong with them.
right,
Kids want to do what they want to do, and frequently that's different from what you want them to do. That's not abnormal behavior.
right,
That's just and so children are resisting. You say, honey, I want you to go clean your room today. No kid wants to go clean his room today. So they're going to resist a little bit. All right. And so houses are physically trying to fall apart, children are resisting you, and you're exhausted. Okay.
right,
So we understand all that part. But while we apologize and we acknowledge that this is difficult, we also know, and this is really important, if you can't impose a schedule on your children, you probably won't impose anything else.
right,
I don't say that the schedule is the easiest thing to do. But if you can't get your kids out of bed in the morning, if you can't get them into bed at night, if you can't
right,
get them to the kitchen at mealtime, you're probably not going to accomplish much else with them.
right. Yeah,
I don't know how else to say that.
I've never seen a situation as I try to think about it where a parent struggles with those kinds of things, struggles with a routine, with a schedule, but then says, "Oh, but it's so easy getting him off his games. Oh,
Right.
it's so easy to get him to do his homework."
So, right.
You know, that all of those things kind of flow together. If you can manage a schedule, if you can impose a schedule, if you can develop a schedule that everybody is able to follow,
Mhm.
typically that goes along with, and yeah, we can manage homework and we can manage, getting them off games and structuring those kinds of things. But so you have to be able to impose a schedule. And so you mentioned if you can't impose a schedule, then you won't be able to impose anything else. If you choose not to, if you just don't impose a schedule, you're probably not going to be able to manage these other things either.
Yeah, there is this relationship between chaos. You mentioned chaos earlier. If you can't impose a schedule, if you just allow your house to be chaotic, I think you're right. I think it's going to be impossible to manage their time on electronics, the time that they spend on homework, their ability to take care of their own rooms or their own possessions or do their own laundry. I think if you don't have a schedule, it's highly unlikely that your kids are going to accept responsibility to take care of their obligations.
Right.
I just don't think you can have both.
Yeah, no, I have a number of patients, and I'm sure you do too, where, teenagers who admit, they acknowledge that they are up playing video games until 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning.
Right.
Um, and then, invariably you ask about school, about that kind of stuff, and they're not getting that work done. They're not getting those things done. And it's when chaos reigns, the consequences of chaos, come about.
Right.
When you can't gain some control over things, then you don't have control over anything. And
You
so
know,
we have to find that sweet spot
mhm.
between having too much control, because we don't want to do that, but we also don't want to have too little control. We want to make sure that we have some say, some
Right.
structure built around that chaos.
Right. Bernie, when parents come in, and I know this, I know you deal with this every week. Parents come in and say, I just can't get him out of bed in the morning.
Hmm.
Why can't, and my first question is, well, that's, I mean, not a question anymore. So then he's staying up late. He's
Hmm.
staying up too late at night. If
Right.
he gets enough sleep, he'll get up in the morning.
Right.
If he's too tired, and people will say it's almost like they're sleepwalking. Well,
Hmm.
that means you're waking them up after just a few hours of sleep. That's what
Right.
that means. It doesn't mean they have a sleep disorder. They're just staying up too late. And they say, well, I can't get him to bed at night. Well, that's what we're talking about. If you can't impose that much of a schedule, you're never going to get control of their electronics.
Right.
You just won't,
Right.
um, because they're up on their electronics, and
Right.
that's why they're not going to sleep. No kid needs a cell phone in bed.
Right.
There isn't a child in this world that needs to bring a cell phone to bed.
Right.
Uh, but they insist that they have to, okay?
Right.
And it's because they want to use it at night and
Right.
they don't get up in the morning. So if you don't have a schedule, if you don't have a minimum schedule of bedtime, getting up time, meal time, you're not going to control any other aspect of their life.
Right. So the first thing parents have to do is recognize how much control they need.
How much do you, right?
And it does vary from family to family. There are some families where kids react and respond to chaos so dramatically that the
Right.
parents have to have more control to
Mhm.
avoid those situations that just get everything riled up and everything out of control. Other parents don't need as much because the kids kind of regulate themselves, and
Right.
there are kids out there like that. For those of you who think that's a myth, there are those situations where the kids kind of,
Some kids do. Yeah.
I have a number of patients who at about 8 o'clock every day, the kid says, I'm ready for bed.
Right.
Believe
Right.
it or not, there are kids who
Mhm.
do that. So depending on the nature of your home, the amount of control you're going to need is going to vary. But you just have to make sure that you don't try to get too much control to the point where all the springs and everything just explode out because you can't maintain it.
Right. There are some parents want a sort of a military kind of discipline
Right.
that when I give an order, I expect it to be followed immediately.
Right.
Okay. That's one extreme. Okay. Is that sort of authoritarian. When I say do this, you do it immediately and
Um,
you do it with a happy look on your face. Okay. There are kids who are not going to tolerate that. There are some children who simply won't tolerate it. Some will cower in fear and they'll do it as long as it's being imposed. Most kids are going to resist, and the resistance is going to bring trouble for both of you.
mhm.
The other thing you have to remember is that while you, as a parent, may want total control, you also have to think about how much control your children will tolerate. Some
Right.
will tolerate a lot, and some will tolerate almost none.
Right.
And you have to judge that based on the children you have. If you have no control at all, and it is total chaos, I mean, just kids are just running around, staying up late, getting up, waking up in the afternoon. If you give up completely, that kind of chaos is going to be detrimental to your children. If you go to the other extreme and say, we're going to have military discipline, that's probably going to be detrimental to your children. So we want to get this, there's some place between those two things. We call it a sweet spot or the Goldilocks theory of let's get it just right
Mhm.
for how much control you need and how much control your children will tolerate.
Absolutely. Now we're gonna talk more about some of this stuff in the next podcast and over the next
Mhm.
uh, we always talk about these kinds of things because this is the crux of, healthy parenting and raising kids in healthy ways. And so we'll be talking more about this. We know that, again, we know that it's not easy,
Right.
but so if you're really struggling in imposing or developing a structure or a schedule or routine in your family, get help. Seek out a therapist or a counselor or psychologist or someone that can help you, you know, look at the variables that are involved and help you bring some structure to it. So,
Right.
all
Yep.
right. Well, that is it for today. Until next time, stay happy, stay healthy, and forget to be afraid.